So I will say a couple quick things in this video. So there is traditional attachment theory. It's an amazing body of work developed by John Bowlby, Mary Ainsworth. They use things like the strange situation experiment to identify individuals' attachment styles and different temperaments associated with each of those attachment styles. Now, there wasn't a whole lot of work in that body of work or research done about how to actually heal an attachment style. And so there was also a lot of, fine-tuned details missing beyond just discussing the temperament. And so what actually happened in my case individually is that I was running a very busy client-based practice back in 2013, 2014. Really, really ramped up. And what I found is soon around that time, after a couple of very busy years of working with people one-on-one, I actually ended up in a situation where I revisited attachment theory. It was something I'd learned in school, but never really thought too much about. And I realized very profoundly how much each of the things that I was working on with my clients individually, I was working on a lot of the subconscious mind and really healing and reconditioning. And from this client-based practice point of view, I was working with people on core wounds and their needs and learning to emotionally regulate their strong emotions and their triggers, learning to communicate more effectively, set healthier boundaries in their lives, and also learning to upgrade unhealthy patterns of coping or behavior, binge eating food or addictive habits, self sabotage, things like this. And so what was so crazy to me is when I revisited attachment theory after a couple of very busy years in client based practice, I realized, wow, each of these attachment styles, all of these things I'm working on with clients group and fit perfectly into these packages of attachment styles. And each unique attachment style that John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth originally developed has specific individual core wounds, different emotional patterns, different needs in a relationship, a different relationship to their boundaries, a different relationship to how they communicate and what they would need to work on to communicate more effectively, and their coping mechanisms and behaviors, things like activating or deactivating strategies. So what I created and published in 2019 and actually copyrighted and went through that whole legal process around was creating Gibson Integrated Attachment Theory, which essentially takes traditional attachment theory, plugs those attachment styles in, but then really highlights those six major components of attachment styles and really overlaps that with dealing with this in terms of healing at the subconscious level of mind. And what we found at PDS over the past couple of years is that if individuals dug in and they really spent a few hours a week covering these six major things and really reconditioning them at the subconscious level and doing the work, there's some time investment up front to do so. We found that within 90 days, individuals became dominantly securely attached by highlighting and really working on these things. Now, I'm going to be pulling from that today here to help you dig into how to recognize different attachment styles. And we're actually going to talk about some of the core wounds part for anxious preoccupied. We're going to go through the needs. And this will help you not just at a high level through like temperament or patterns, see what somebody's attachment style might be, but really digging in to identify these things at a deeper level, according to the body of work that I've been working on for about 10 years now. So the major core wounds you'll see with a fearful avoidant attachment style are things like I will be betrayed. So this suspicion, this fear of trusting, really letting their guard down with people. I will be unsafe is actually there. And you won't see it so much in terms of them like expressing feelings of unsafety or fearing being unsafe, but you'll see it in the fact that fearful avoidance, when they feel unsafe, they have an overly exaggerated fight, flight, freeze, and fawn response. And the roots of that are a core wound of unsafety. So you'll see, for example, they'll people please a lot. They will flee the scene very strongly. They will over defend themselves if they feel attacked. It's like they'll fight too strongly back. Or they can go through these extended periods of time of freezing, but they're more situated in those other three responses. So you'll see that I am unworthy. Fearful avoidants spend a lot of time trying to earn their worth. I am bad. Fearful avoidants often try to proclaim their innocence and are afraid of seeming like a bad person or doing the wrong thing in a relationship. I will be abandoned is still very much there for a fearful avoidant. Scared of being trapped, helpless, or powerless, especially if they rely on other people. And a core wound around being disrespected, they can really come on strong if they feel disrespected, or unloved or weak. So these tend to be the major core wounds fearful avoidants experience the most. The emotions they experience are things like anger, hurt, frustration, overwhelmed, pressured, guilt, ashamed, anxious, and offended. And you'll see differently that, anxious preoccupieds, for example, they struggle with a loneliness, um, anxiety, panic, desperation, regret, sadness, right? And you'll see avoidance, dismissive avoidance tend to struggle with things like shame wounds, feeling irritated, annoyed, frustrated, numb, these sorts of emotions. So you'll see these different patterns really spliced out there based on the different attachment styles. And then the needs of the fearful avoidant, they tend to need a lot of emotional depth, passion, presence. They really want people to be present with them. They need a sense of safety in relationships more than they consciously often recognize in order for the relationship to function. They often need novelty, they need growth, they need independence, freedom, and they need intimacy and to feel connected. And they need trust in order for a relationship to function long term as well. Without trust for fearful avoidance, relationships really fall into a million pieces very quickly. And it tends to be a high need for things to function. And that's like, as a general rule, of course, true of all relationships. Like without trust, there isn't a proper foundation built for a relationship. But from a fearful avoidant point of view, if that trust is not there, you're going to have like these extreme highs and lows much more quickly in relationships, followed by the breakdown of a relationship very, very, very fast. So just it's like a magnified version compared to other attachment styles, especially secure. Um, the relationship to boundaries. Fearful avoidants are all or nothing with their boundaries. They often won't have any boundaries, any boundaries, any boundaries. And then they will get into a position where they feel triggered by this lack of boundaries and they will set boundaries from a place of anger. Now, I want to be clear, like setting good boundaries is not trusting yourself to set boundaries when you're really mad. That's actually poor boundary setting. A lot of things had to go wrong first before you felt safe to set a boundary, right? You use your anger kind of as a shield to set a boundary or as a protective mechanism or like courage, right? But healthy boundary setting is just being able to say, somebody says, "Hey, Thais, will you do this?" And I'm like, "Oh, no, I don't feel like doing that." Or somebody says, "Hey, Thais, can you commit to doing this thing?" And I'm like, "You know what? I don't think I can, but I hope you have a nice time doing it." Right. So it's just being able to say yeses and nos from like this natural space. Whereas fearful avoidance will tend to people please so strongly until they've had enough, they feel burnt out, and then they come really hard with boundaries after the point. And then you'll see as well from a fearful, so just so you see here, right? So we're talking about integrated attachment theory. So we're talking about core wounds, we're talking about needs, we're talking about emotional patterns. These all apply at the subconscious level of mind, right? We're talking about boundaries. And then the other two things I mentioned are the communication patterns and coping mechanisms or behaviors. So from the communication patterns, you'll see that the things that are really important when communicating with a fearful avoidant, they really want direct communication. They want transparency. They want context. They really want to understand the why behind things a lot. And it's because if you grow up in a really unpredictable environment, then you're constantly seeking the whys as a subconscious strategy to get safety. It's like if I can know why you do what you do, I can predict your patterns better and then I can feel safer more easily. So you'll see these things really tied together. They tend to be really unafraid of conflict and they can communicate sometimes in a volatile way, especially if they're really triggered. And they will often not communicate their true needs generally ahead of time. They'll do it reactively, but they'll do it in the negative, right? Similar to an anxious preoccupied. So they both have this capacity to say, instead of saying, "Hey, I could use some support. Can you take a turn doing the dishes?" They'll say, "You never do the dishes," right? And fearful avoidance may take that another level and also, if they're really triggered, say, like, "You are not a good partner," and they'll kind of like be much more harsh with their words, whereas anxious preoccupieds will just tend to communicate in anger and frustration. "You never do the dishes, you don't care about me," kind of more of like a guilting way, whereas fearful avoidance can kind of shame the other person or pass judgment about the other person. Not always, but like when they're really triggered. And you'll see that they tend to have these all or nothing patterns of communication as a whole. So not communicate at all, stonewall, be really cold, or blah. Like the volcano erupts, everything comes out at once. And often you'll see with fearful avoidance, they may say, like, yesterday at 2 p.m. and 4 Fridays ago at 4 p.m., you didn't do this and this. And they can really keep the score for a long period of time, probably possibly because they're tracking things a lot, right? So they tend to track, making sure that as a means to earn their worth, to bypass that core wound we talked about earlier. They always want to make sure that they're sort of doing a little bit more than the other person in the relationship so that they don't feel unworthy of that person. But that causes them to track everything. And then when they feel frustrated, they start tracking all the things the other person isn't doing. And it becomes this vicious cycle, right? Where they overgive, they under receive because they don't feel worthy of receiving. Then they feel burnt out and frustrated. Then they get angry. They become volatile in their communication. And it may not be in extremes, but they can be harsh or really critical and let a whole bunch of things out at once. Then they feel guilty for this. And then they go back to people pleasing to try to get out of that guilt. But then the people pleasing just goes back again to giving too much, under receiving too little, and then feeling frustrated, burnt out, getting angry. Like you just see the cycle continue in the communication patterns for FAs. So I have some really exciting news, and it's that integrated attachment theory training is back. In other words, you can be trained to become a relationship coach certified in integrated attachment theory in literally 60 days. So who is this for? Well, of course, this is for any individual who wants to make an impact and really be of service to others while also obtaining freedom and flexibility and abundance in their lives. And this is also for anybody who's already a counselor, a therapist, a coach, and just really wants to expand their toolkit. We've had so many people enter into the integrated attachment theory program because they're just looking to obtain a certain degree of mastery in terms of understanding their own attachment patterns and also the attachment patterns of maybe their children or partner or other loved ones in their lives, so they can really support those people and understand them more deeply. Now, please keep in mind that the last 2 times we ran this program, we filled up very fast. In fact, we oversold the programs and sold out completely. So if you're interested, click the link below to learn more and dive in with me. And I'd love to see you on the other side before seats run out. And then last but not least, the common behavioral coping mechanisms you'll see are they will test a lot. You may not recognize how much they're testing in relationships, but they will often test, like, did your story add up? Did you make sense? Like, they have a lot of suspicious tendencies. They will withdraw to decompress. They can really like fall off the face of the earth. They can be very present and then very gone. Again, you see like these kind of all or nothing patterns for the fearful avoidant in their paradigm. They can stonewall, they can be very spiteful when they feel triggered or hurt. And it's interesting because I talk a lot about on this channel how spitefulness is often a subconscious strategy to get empathy. It's like, oh, if I don't know how to get you to empathize with me, I'm going to hurt you how you hurt me. And then you're going to feel what I feel. And it's like this way of getting empathy, but it's an unhealthy way. They can struggle more with emotional volatility, and their behavioral coping mechanisms can be to strongly activate or deactivate. And they tend to have these over magnified fight, flight, freeze, or fawn responses, as I talked about earlier. And just like dismissive avoidance, they tend to share a lot of creature comforts. So what you'll see here is like this will give you the profile according to Gibson Integrated Attachment Theory, this copyrighted body of work that we have to really deeply understand, like, not only what attachment style are you, but what is somebody else that's in your life. And this will help you dig deep into these 6 major components, because when you can heal these 6 major things, you can reprogram your core wounds, you can learn to emotionally regulate, you can learn to meet your needs and communicate your needs to other people, you can set boundaries and then update your unhealthy coping patterns really at a subconscious level. Like, all the tools that we have are designed to deal with this at the subconscious level of mind. This is how we become securely attached as quickly as possible, because we're dealing with the root causes of these things. So this should give you a lot more direction, hopefully. We have all those 6 courses inside PDS designed to help you dig into these things one at a time and really see that needle move and see those results. And if you want to check that all out for free for 7 days using the link below, then I would love to see you on the other side. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in future videos.